Thanks very much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here, and I can't vouch for myself, but I know that you're doing a service here by putting on a program like this. So it's I think it's a great opportunity. Thank you.
Well, here in Santa Barbara, we have so many very interesting people who have led these fascinating lives and then come to enjoy retirement. Though I know you're still traveling all over the world, so we still work, yet we love living here. You've done so much in this area, knowing that Earth Day is coming up. We have the Community Environmental Council. We have so many people interested in this topic. I think this will be a really interesting one to share here locally and globally. So let's get started. So with your extensive experience, what are some unconventional or underexplored economic policies that you believe could significantly impact climate change mitigation?
Well, what's interesting is some of what I think are real solutions to climate change are actually very well known, certainly in the policy and economics community. I think the key limitation is basically the political will to implement them.
Mm,
And here I'm talking about basically putting a price on carbon emissions, on carbon pollution. Um, Climate change has been described as the greatest market failure of all time. By market failure, I mean climate change takes place outside of our market economy. Um, I can make the parallel to, let's say you want to rent an apartment and you come to an agreement about what the rent will be, and you move in, and then you find out the guy right above you likes to play his drums loudly
mm,
at 10 p.m. at night, right when you want to go to sleep. That's what economists call an externality. Okay.
okay.
Something outside the original transaction or bargain. A third party is now in effect interfering. So we could actually solve that problem, even in the case of the drummer. In theory, you could make a deal with the drummer and say, here, I'll pay you $10 a day or a month, whatever, if you don't play your drums after 10 p.m. Or the drummer could come to you and say, I'll pay you $10 a day, a night, if you put up with my drumming. So there's a way in economic theory where you could put a price on a bad, in this case, noise. So let's transfer that to climate change. We combust fossil fuels and greenhouse gases go in the air. And basically no one pays for that pollution or the damages that
Mm,
pollution is causing and will cause in the future. So in order to internalize that cost, bring it into the market, I believe, and many other economists believe, that the real solution here is to put a price on carbon. You could put a tax, for example, a levy per unit of carbon emission, or another common policy option often discussed is so-called cap and trade. John McCain actually sponsored a bill in the Senate that went pretty far many years ago, didn't pass. However, we've used cap and trade successfully in the past. Basically, you put a quota on the amount of emissions that a company, let's say, or a utility company could produce. And if they want to exceed that cap, they have to trade, they have to acquire the rights in a cash for right to emit type transaction.
exactly.
And we applied that to acid rain in the mid 70s. Interestingly, under the Nixon administration was the pioneer, and acid rain was controlled within 10 to 15 years at a cost a fraction of the initial estimates. So again, the option of taxing carbon pollution or putting limits and allowing people to trade the quotas or allowances, I believe, economists believe, would be a very effective option.
You said that we lack the political will. I mean, we're in this supercharged political environment right now, and it feels like there's a lot of things ahead of this on the list of things to be dealt with. Yet this, if some will say, is probably should be the number one thing we deal with. Yet in lacking the political will, is there, I mean, any hope for that?
I think there is hope. I mean, first off, let's look at Europe, for example. The Europeans have had an internal cap and trade or carbon trading system going for about more than a decade now. It's called ETS, the European Trading System. And it covers almost half the emissions that the European Union produces, where companies need to obtain a permit or using their own devices, internal investments, limit their greenhouse gas emissions. And so there's an established price of that permit and it trades within the market actively. So that's a large scale precedent. Here in this country, at least so far, we've shied away from actually putting a price on carbon emissions and more tended towards regulation. And also recently through the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, we are putting forward large scale subsidies to primarily clean energy technologies. Now that works fine, but a concern that's out there is how affordable is that going to be in the long run? It will get us so far, but can we continue to spend the kind of volumes, in this case of federal budget spending, for the long run that it's going to require to really finish this race and combat climate change?
Well, when you think about the future of renewable energy in the global energy mix, what economic policies are going to be key to accelerating its adoption?
Well, not to sound like a broken record, but certainly put a price on carbon. So in other words, that's a form of reward. If you're a renewable energy entrepreneur, developer, producer, and you know that you're going to avoid a tax or you're going to obtain a credit that can be turned into cash, that's going to be a great incentive for you to develop renewable energy. At the same time, it's a disincentive for the continued development and use of fossil fuels. So what we're doing is we're leveling the playing field. We're bringing this carbon pollution right where it belongs, and that is so that consumers face the music when they make choices about a lower polluting option or a more polluting option.
So when we look at that globally, though, because I just think of this isn't a partisan issue, yet it's a partisan issue. Is that the same? You're the expert. Is it a nonpartisan problem has become a partisan issue? Is it like that in India and China and the rest of Asia and the non-EU countries?
Yeah, I would say this is a divisive issue globally. One of the divisions has to be certainly, and you kind of hinted at it, between North and South, between the developed world and the developing world.
Right.
Developing world feels that the North, the industrialized countries, we've developed through a very energy intensive lifestyle and infrastructure. And in the course of achieving our wealth, we've eaten up the carbon carrying capacity of the atmosphere. And now the South, the developing world, is trying to play catch up in terms of income and lifestyle. And that implies that they're going to have to consume more energy. And the question is, what kind of energy are they going to consume in the future? Dirty energy or clean energy? And those countries want compensation from the North for, again, our polluting lifestyle of the past, and we in the North are more responsible for climate change to date than the poor countries. Going forward, however, unless the developing countries clean up their act, we're really in a mess, because the industrialized world could clean up, but if the South continues to pollute, we will never reach our climate mitigation goals.
So I'm thinking about telecommunications real quick, and I know that it took a while for mobile phones to catch on, but once they did, everybody had the mobile phone. Yet, if you look in Africa, the percentage of people who have mobile phones and connectivity is somewhere at 99% or something like that. And so they kind of leapfrogged. They leapfrogged and went into this technology. Is there hope that renewable energies become so easy to implement, cost effective, and ubiquitous that they actually leapfrog our ability to transition from fossil fuels to that down in the South? Let's just call it the South. So that they just go straight to that and actually leapfrog us. Am I Am I wrong, or is that
No, it's by no means a pipe dream, and it's starting to happen right now. And what's very interesting is that to look at the technological and cost progress behind renewable energy. So for example, take wind power.
yeah?
When wind power was first being commercialized in the early 70s, a kilowatt hour, 1 unit of electricity from wind was 55 cents a kilowatt hour in 1973 prices. Today, in a good wind site, you can produce wind energy at 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Same thing with solar energy, photovoltaics, solar panels. Back in the 70s, they were costing $100 per peak watt of capacity. That's now down to 26 cents in today's dollars. And so the economics are really creating a groundswell behind renewable energy. In fact, today, wind and solar, among other renewable technologies, they're actually cheaper than fossil fuel energy like coal and gas or oil. The real problem, though, is energy storage.
Right.
We get wind energy when the wind blows, we get solar energy when the sun shines, but a lot of our demand, of course, are off those hours. And so the real challenge right now is what I would call to build the integrated system, including energy storage. And batteries are holding really great promise. And you can see how battery technology has improved, has made the electric vehicle possible. That same progression of technology is going to make energy storage at a large scale possible to integrate with electric grids. And that's the promise for developing countries, that they don't have to follow the same path we did. They can leapfrog into renewable energy and energy storage.
Another bunch of questions. Next Energy, who we had on the show a couple of years ago here in Santa Barbara, they have developed they're out of UCSB Materials Science Lab, have developed that coating that they can put on glass, and which turns the glass into solar. So you think of these, massive skyscrapers and glass buildings that are generating energy. You talk, there's the generation, there's the distribution and storage. There's those areas. And we had the director of strategy for our nation's battery policy at Sandia Lab on the show 2 years ago. He said there's like 11 of us in the world who were thinking about this. And just quickly, so I get it, because I'm thinking very, very locally right now. I put a little solar light out in front of my garage a week ago, but it doesn't get enough sun, so it only lasts for a couple of hours at night. And I was like, oh, and I'm thinking about the kinds of battery storage you're talking about. Are you envisioning that those are, let's call it a big battery plant, and then distributes the electricity, the energy, or is that something we'll have locally distributed? What's the most efficient? I just have not thought about it at scale.
Yeah, it's like asking a 5-year-old, what ice cream, what would you rather like, chocolate or vanilla? And the kid will always say both. And so you're going to get the same answer from me. We need both, just what we call distributed energy.
Yeah.
And we still need centralized energy systems.
Okay.
And so what we're going to see right now, our energy system is, particularly electricity system, is highly centralized. And what we're energy transition now, so that energy generation and energy storage is going to become much more decentralized. And one of the advantages is it's going to reduce the inefficiencies of having to transmit and distribute electrical energy all over the place. At the same time, that doesn't mean we're going to abandon centralized energy systems and central energy storage. So what you're going to see are large scale, let's say, battery parks or special purpose hydroelectric schemes that store energy by storing water. But at the same time, people's electric vehicles are going to become what we call bidirectional charging.
Exactly.
You're going to charge up your EV hopefully during the daytime when maybe it's parked using solar energy, or maybe energy from solar that's stored in your battery. And at night, when the sun isn't shining, your EV is going to help power your house.
Exactly.
And that's, actually starting next year, California is implementing regulations that all EV chargers for home and commercial use we'll have to have this two-way capability.
Yeah, there's a lot of innovation in that space. And this is where I'm curious, does the South get there quicker because they don't need to convert?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that.
That's the hope. One of the problems, though, is energy policies in the South, just like here in the North, there are a lot of distortions. So, for example, fossil fuels are underpriced in many countries, including the developing world. So if policymakers are not willing to let the market set an efficient real price on, say, coal and gas, then how's renewable energy going to compete?
Right, right. That makes sense. I'm curious. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. You've kind of been there, done that, and I'm, reflecting on your tenure at the World Bank. Could you give us I love a story, a specific instance where a particular policy or initiative had a profound impact on a country's approach to climate change? I know that's a long question. I have like a minute left in this part of this session.
Well, I could reflect on my personal experience. It turns out that Mexico in Oaxaca has some of the best wind resources in the world. And I came to Mexico in the early 2000s, and through the United States government's aid program, the US had prepared an extensive wind map of Oaxaca. And it's like a carburetor in the old days, it'd suck the warm air from the Caribbean, gets sucked over to the cold Pacific. And we shared that data with Mexican policymakers. And within a decade following that initiative, we went from just a few megawatts of wind energy to today, it's well over 10,000 megawatts. So it's getting the information to the right people, the people in power, and making them realize that in this case, renewable energy was viable and a good deal for Mexico.
Charles, thank you so much for helping us understand a very complex subject.
Well, I've really appreciated the time to spend with you, and I hope I've contributed something to understanding of people of what I consider to be maybe mankind's or humankind's greatest challenge today.